My name is Miloš Manić, by the way. I'm Professor of Computer Science, Director of VCU Cybersecurity Center. I'm CCI Fellow, IEEE Fellow, and my great pleasure today is to give you a real treat, introduce Major General Norris. It will be very difficult to summarize his bio in few sentences, so I'm not going to do you, or maybe I'll just let you speak. I tried summarizing in a couple of sentences. Major General Norris is native of Richmond, Virginia, alumni of Virginia Commonwealth University, earned degrees from VCU or ODU, U.S. Army War College, and several others. His awards and decorations include the Legion of Merit with 2 oak leaf clusters, Bronze Star Medal, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal with oak leaf cluster, the Meritorious Service Medal with silver oak leaf cluster, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, and the Army Parachute Badge. He has served 26 continuous years in active duty status as both an active component, active Guard Reserve, and Troop Program Unit Officer. I would like to welcome Major General 2-star General Norris today, and I will just mention that we have in the audience Vice President for Research and Innovation, Dr. Srinama Rao, Interim Dean, Dr. Gary Pepper, Interim Computer Science Chair, President Ghosh, fellows of our center and undergraduate and graduate students. Thank you all for coming. Without further ado.
All right, thanks. Dr. Manic, thanks for inviting me down today. I'm here this morning with my deputy, Nate Kolodny. He's kind of roaming around taking pictures. I am the Army Chief Information Security Officer, a position that didn't exist 4 years ago in the Army. But if you're here this morning, I would expect that you're interested in cybersecurity. And it's telling that all the services now in the Department of Defense, the Marine, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army, all have CISOs, right? They didn't have them 4 years ago, now they do, which is telling, and most of the large organizations out there have them. So it's an honor and pleasure to be here this morning. I have a lot of notes to go through, and I don't know if I'll go through them verbatim, but I'll try to stay on track. Now, I work for the CIO of the Army. His name's Dr. Raj Iyer. He's been the CIO for about 2 years. And Nate and I work in the Pentagon. So Dr. Manic, you got Nate and I out of the Pentagon today. So a lot of people think, oh, you work in the Pentagon. I mean, well, okay, it's process, it's policy. It's not like being in the field, right? I came from Hawaii this summer where I worked for 5 years, and working in the Pentagon is a lot different. It's important work that we do in the building. But Dr. Manic, it's Friday and you got us out of the building today. So thanks for getting us out of the Beltway for at least a few hours. The general rule is when you leave the Pentagon for more than 4 hours, you don't go back. So we'll spend a little time here today after this back in my hometown. So 35 years ago, I roamed the campus here at VCU. As I was describing, a very different campus today. No School of Engineering. Now there is. So the school has certainly evolved. And almost unrecognizable to me as we drove around for about 30 minutes this morning. So I'm the Army CISO. I never expected I'd be back at VCU 35 years later talking to you in this role, right? I'm a communications officer by trade, coming out of the School of Humanities and Sciences as a communications major. You know, I entered the Army not thinking I was going to be an IT guy, but that's what I've been doing in the Army for 30 years. As I said, came out of Hawaii in command for 3 years and was asked to be the CISO. So I was thinking about, as I was preparing for this, the term cybersecurity, from my research, traces back to about 1989. And then we use the term information security, network security. 89 was about the time I was here when we started using this word or this term cybersecurity. And it's an obvious thing for me to say to all of you that, since the time I was here, what cyber has done is inherently changed how we live, how we operate. And I come to you today representing the Department of Defense. So I am interested in defense of the nation. Our number one goal in the Army and the Department of Defense is number one, to deter conflict. That's absolutely the first and foremost priority. Number two is to fight and win our nation's wars. So we, like industry, like society, we operate largely on networks today and how we do business. And my job as the Army CISO is to think about how we can improve our security posture with the networks that we operate on today. So I'm going to describe to you a lot of things. I'll talk about our cybersecurity landscape. I'll talk about some challenges we have and where we're going. The one point I want to make to you, though, before I move on, is in the realm of IT, because I've worked in the IT business for the Army for a long time. What I've learned, yes, we have automated tools. We have automated systems. We have machines that can do things on their own. You talked about it, you know, machine learning and AI, right? It's evolving. All that is evolving, but to me, it's still going to take people to operate all this technology, right? And so that's the point I'll make at the end is the future workforce. We've already assessed in the Army with a limited study that was done. We have about 2,800 cybersecurity professionals in the Army. Most of those are civilians. A portion of those are in uniform. And then there's a portion that are contractors. Some experts that we don't have, we have to go out and hire from industry because we just don't have the expertise. We're manned at about 80% of those numbers. So not bad, but the real telling point of the study that was done was of our existing workforce. If we look at future technologies, they're only about 60% qualified with what we're going to be doing in the future. So we have a real challenge with the talent that we have and what they're skilled to do. Many of them, I came from Hawaii. A lot of our civilian workforce are skilled on the old technology, right? The old legacy equipment that we're trying to get rid of. They are not skilled in the future technology. And so that's a gap for us. And so as I talk to this group, you know, if you have an interest, and many of you are already working in the industry, we are certainly interested, not just in your opportunities with the government, but in industry, because we're going to have industry to help us as we move forward. So, so those are my opening remarks. So I'm going to take you through a few slides here. I think I'm controlling them, which is hopefully not a dangerous thing here, but if I just push the arrow down, or do I need to click? All right. Okay, there we go. All right. All right. So I'm going to take you through the terrain. All right. A lot of smart folks in the room here. This is not intended to be a cyber 101 brief. It may come out that way at certain points. You're saying, hey, General, we already knew this. All right, fine. Just bear with me as I go through this. Don't want to insult anyone's intelligence, but I think as we talk about cybersecurity, I think it's important to understand the terrain we're talking about. Now, when I say cyber terrain, we often in the Army refer to this as our attack surface, right? Our attack surface. So I think you need to understand these layers if you don't already. And so I'll just take you through a few notes that I have on this. In order to talk about our physical layer, our logical layer, or our social layer, it's important to understand. And some companies and folks I talk to are like, well, you know, yeah, I'm concerned about it, but now, you know, I don't own it. Like, do you even understand the cyber terrain that you're trying to protect? Do you even understand it? And a lot of folks today say, sir, I don't care. Why? Because I farmed it out to the cloud. I'm paying someone else to do it. I bought insurance, right? I'm not worried. You know, if I lose it, I bought insurance, so I'm protected. I'm like, okay, fine. Maybe you've done that. We haven't done that in the Army. We still own infrastructure around the world, right? Every Army base, camp, and station, we have a network, and we still manage that network. We also have an Army cloud now, and we've put we have about 280 app services and tool in the Army cloud. It's either with Microsoft Azure, it may be with Amazon Web Services. So we're building out a cloud too, and we're putting some of our data off-prem, but we're still interested in securing it. We haven't like sold it all out to industry, and we're still very concerned about securing our data. So as you look at this asset visibility, right? Do you even know what you have? So many times in the Army, we'll have an incident, a cybersecurity incident. It could be SolarWinds, right? There's a problem with the SolarWinds version of software. It's a vulnerability. And then, you know, we try to figure this out in the Army. We're like, hey, we know we bought 40 licenses. We think it's installed on 40 machines, but we're not real sure. Where are those machines? Number one. And then are they even connected? Number two, like, are they disconnected, stored in some supply closet? And then next week they're going to be brought out and plugged in, and we haven't fixed the vulnerability. So asset visibility is just one example of, do you even understand what you have? Do you have a tool that can give you that clarity? It's a real challenge because the Army network has been built year by year by year, pieced together, and it's a huge challenge thinking about our terrain and that discovery piece. So, so again, to break it down classically, physical, logical, and social layers. My perspective of these three, as the CISO for the Army, I'm mostly concerned about the logical layer and the social layer. I'm still concerned about the physical. Yeah, we have red teams, right, that come on to Army camps. They pose as janitors, right? They get into your building and somehow they find their way into your secure comms closet. And, you know, and the janitor's in there in the uniform and he's plugged into your secure router and they take a picture and, we got in. I'm like, okay, that's bad. We're absolutely concerned about our physical infrastructure and the ability to someone to get into our spaces, right? Right. And it's also a concern for the commercial cloud, right? Like, I don't own that. I'm saying I trust Microsoft, I trust Amazon that you're going to secure your own facility. I am concerned about physical, but not as much. I'm more concerned about logical and social. Again, this is all based on my experience. Let me give you an example with the logical. 2.5 years ago in Hawaii, we had a hard network outage. What we call in the Army NIPRNet, our unclassified network, Fort Shafter, Hawaii, about 3,000 users. All of my bosses, no network for 7 hours, right? That's a pretty bad day. They can't access their data, can't access email. It took us 7 hours to discover that one IP phone, it was just one IP-based phone that was plugged into a server, was requesting an IP address, like from a DHCP server, if you know what I'm talking about. It was requesting the IP address 100 times per second at such a high rate that it overwhelmed the processor on that server, which then overwhelmed the processor on the edge router, which then took the network down. It took us 7 hours to figure out that there was this one phone doing that. And then the second part of that, I go to my boss, the 4-star, sir, here's what happened. He's like, what? How did that happen? His first question was that deliberate? Did someone do that on purpose? Was that an attack? Is someone in our network? Next day, I couldn't answer the question. We couldn't figure it out. We think it was a deliberate attack or deliberate attempt by someone, maybe inside our network, as we talk about the social layer, that might have done that on purpose, but we could never prove it. But the example I just gave you, you know, how would you ever thought that would have ever happened on your logical infrastructure? So my point when I talk about the terrain and where I'm concerned, I am mostly concerned with the ability to someone to get in our network, not to physically destroy it, but yeah, that would be bad if they did, if they got access in, turned everything off or destroyed it. But if they did that, you wouldn't have an attack surface to operate on. You know, the actor, good or bad, if you take away the attack surface physically, they don't have a playground to roam on, if you will. So that's why the logical, right, the ability to get inside our network and disrupt something in the infrastructure, and you guys can think about VMware, you can think about software-defined networks. The ability for someone to get inside and disrupt that, to me, is more concerning than you could actually destroy it, right? Because I think if you destroy it, you take away the terrain they could operate on. And then I could talk about insider threats all day long. That's probably as much as concern as an external threat. Half the problems we have on our network and our infrastructure and cyber, it's someone that made a deliberate change, thinking it was a good change. We need to upgrade, we need to remediate, we need to take X, Y, Z action. And there was an unintended consequence of that change, right? We made the change. We didn't think it was going to take the network down in Japan for 3 hours, but it did, right? So that's why when I talk about this terrain, I am more concerned about the logical and the social layers than I am about the physical layer. I'm still concerned about all of it, but in the context of cybersecurity and my role for the Army, I am more concerned today about the logical and the social layers. Right. The second part of the terrain that I'd like to talk to you about is it's ever expanding, right? So, and I'll give you some examples too, because just 20 years ago, I would have never imagined, there's an Army base in Alaska, Delta Junction. Anybody been to Alaska? Anybody? Okay. You know where Delta Junction is? I don't know if you do, but very remote area. Obviously it's Alaska. It gets cold in the winter. And we had, it was a civilian, it wasn't a soldier, that lived in Delta Junction right outside Fort Greely. And like maybe many of you, I know my apartment in DC, my thermostat in my home is connected to the internet. Now, I don't know why, because I've never used it. I've never, I'm not one of these folks who walks around and like, hey, it's cold, let me turn my heat on in my house before I get home. But in Delta Junction, Alaska, someone hacked into this house, turned off the heat in the middle of the night in January, -50. Luckily, the residents woke up. I don't know if it was the sound, but they woke up and they were able to survive. But in Fort Greely, Alaska, we know that if the industrial power plant goes down more than 3 hours, we have to evacuate people. We actually have to go into their houses and wake them up, because if we don't, they'll freeze to death within hours. So that's one example of this terrain and the industrial based controls, things that are becoming more and more connected to this terrain that are posing threats. The second one may resonate more with you. You know, as you mentioned, I'm an Army Reserve General Officer on active duty. So a Reserve Lieutenant Colonel in Palos Verdes, California is a sheriff's deputy. He's a reserve soldier and he's a sheriff's deputy in his full-time job. He did the investigation on the Tiger Woods accident. If you remember, February of 21. So he was a part of that investigation. Now, they never proved this because Tiger claimed in that accident, he went around the corner, he lost control of the car. Well, there was speculation, never proven, that someone hacked into that car and took over the acceleration of the car. Now, anyone have a Tesla here or something that's got a lot of controls tied to the internet? The point I'm making is industrial controls in your house, your vehicle now are vulnerable to attack. They never proved the Tiger case, but it is certainly in the realm of possible that if your systems are interconnected to cyber, that someone could, if they know who you are and want to deliberately take action, they could hack into your vehicle, take control of the vehicle and cause a problem. And Tiger claimed that he lost control of the vehicle. Now, it's interesting, right? So what I'm painting for you here is this terrain that we're talking about is becoming ever more expanded and more complex. And the threat, which we'll talk about in a minute, knows this, right? There are going to be more avenues of approach to attack through different means in the future, because this terrain is ever expanding and it's going to make it more. And in the Army, it's the same, it's no different. We have supply depots, we have munitions depots, we have plants that generate weapons or systems, and those are becoming more and more connected. And as the Army says, so that's something I have to think about, and how do we protect those systems? And these aren't traditional systems, you know, like these aren't like classic endpoints, Windows 10, Windows 11, you patch and you stick it and, you know, it's easy to connect. These are systems that they have serial interfaces, they're legacy, they're things built, they're production systems that we're now connecting for whatever reason to monitor, and how do you protect those, right? So that's a challenge as we talk about terrain. Let me make sure I covered everything here. So again, the point is that this terrain is ever expanding, and we have to think about ways we can protect and secure it. All right, let's talk about threats for a second. Again, let's go. I guess I'm controlling the slides. Let me. You can look at those headlines. Again, this is not meant to be a Cyber 101. I think most of you in this audience know that maybe you've been the victim of an attack personally, whether it was identity or something stolen that you owned. But certainly in DoD, we're not unaffected. You know, my boss's boss, the Secretary of the Army, Christine Wormuth, they're commenting on the quote you see in the middle there about the pipeline attack and people getting in line. I think that was ransomware. So whether we're talking about, when we talk about threats, I can talk about nation state actors for us in DoD. That's, you know, I can tell you straight up, that's China, it's Russia, it's North Korea, and there are many other smaller nation state actors, and they're actors within our own nation. right, that we're concerned about. Since this is an academic environment, when we talk about China, I always caveat anything I say about them is, number one, we want to deter conflict. We're not trying to start a war with anybody, but we are concerned. And I commend to you the book Digital Silk Road by John Hillman. If you haven't read this book, maybe I saw someone shake their head, maybe they have. You don't have to believe everything in the book, but this lays out a plan that the Chinese Communist Party, now I separate, someone who lives in China as a citizen from the party, right? This is written in details, a plan they have to control IT worldwide. I mean, this goes in depth, and I'm an IT person. I read this, I'm like, wow, this is a pretty intricate plan they have with economically consume undersea cables in the Pacific, to consume, there were some deals made here that were very close to them taking over big companies here in the United States that control IT. So the conclusion of the book, if you don't want to read it, it pretty much says, we need to feed the paranoia for the plan that they have laid out, because it's not that they'll necessarily be successful, but they do have a plan to dominate the world globally in IT. And is that a threat to us or isn't? Right. So it's just a very interesting read. I commend to you just to give you perspective, because this is the one form of non-kinetic type action, which culturally for the PRC is a way they can take action, not, save face, if you will, culturally, because, hey, we attacked you, but it wasn't us. You can't attribute it to us. Attribution. Yeah, we think it was you. We looked at the IPs and we're pretty sure it was you, but maybe you disguised the IP through some workstation you used in the States to kind of mask that attack. But we knew it was you, right? And then there's some we just absolutely know it was them trying to hack in. So I commend that to you. And a few other comments when we talk about threats. I certainly won't talk about the types of attacks. You know those: phishing, spyware, and then the industrial base, where new forms of attack are evolving every day. Things you probably, folks are sitting around thinking, well, how can I hack into this? It's happened with power grids already, and in other areas. I gave you the two examples, the one in Alaska and the one with Tiger Woods. All right, so threats. Let's talk next about what is DoD and the Army doing about it. Well, it just so happens, and maybe you're familiar with this document, the White House last year gave the Department of Defense a directive. And actually, this is to the nation, not just the Department of Defense. And some very specific things mentioned here, I'll highlight for you. Bold changes in cybersecurity investments. There's reference to zero trust, which I'll get into later, maybe a topic I would expect you're familiar with, a pretty hot one right now in the Pentagon, kind of area. Also reference to securing our operational technology, which I talked about, the defense industrial base, and this Internet of Things and more things connecting. And that includes what I mentioned with our military depots, our weapons system production facilities. And then it references just building trust in our digital infrastructure by making it more secure. So kind of like the takeaway from this slide is we've gotten an order from the White House to move out in DoD, and for me as the Army CISO to move out and aligning ourselves to a better cybersecurity posture. And the money is coming. Yes, we will. The investment in cybersecurity in DoD is being invested in, and we will be getting money, and how we spend it will be important. It's your taxpayer dollars. So, all right, let's move to challenges. And these are Army cybersecurity challenges. I'll start kind of from the top left here, because some things I've already hit on. Our attack surface, right? So it says they're growing attack surface through commercial cloud and new weapons platforms. And again, I am also, in my role, I'm the authorizing official for the Army Cloud. So anything that gets put into the cloud, whether it's Microsoft, Amazon, whoever's hosting our service tool or app, I have to, my team of cybersecurity professionals provide me a recommendation. Sir, we've looked at this, we've red teamed this platform, we've taken it through a few tests before it goes into production, and we recommend you agree to put it in the cloud, or we recommend you don't agree and go back to the tool developer and have them adjust, right? Or add a security control before we will allow it. So we have a process for doing that. We don't just go here, Microsoft, take it and run with it. We actually red team it. We have cybersecurity teams that come in and will red team our platforms. One example is Hypori. If you've heard of that tool, we have a BYOD tool now. You know, I carry 2 phones, which is not the way we want to be. My boss he came from industry, Dr. Raj Iyer, and he's like, why are we carrying 2 phones around? Why can't we just check our email on our personal phone? Well, we have a tool now. We've red teamed and it's very secure. It uses a thing called Hypori. I can go in 3-factor authentication, email on my personal phone, right? My government email on my personal phone. Those are the type of things we want to do, but when we do them, we want to be secure with them. And so I'm the AO for Army Cloud, and that's part of what I do in my role. Asset visibility, as you see there, ability to see ourselves. Right now in the Army, we have 42 disparate networks, like the MI community, the military intelligence community have their own network. The medical community, they have a medcom.mil network. We have an army.mil network. We have 42 disparate networks. We absolutely need to converge those into a common network, right? It's too many networks, too many. You have so many disparate networks. It just again, your risk with your attack surface is wider. We can bring it all in and secure it as one domain, one network. It's hard to do because all those communities, have interest in protecting the thing that they own, right? So it's a cultural shift as well. But 42 separate networks at the enterprise and tactical levels, and we're driving toward what we're calling the unified network for the Army. Oh yeah, let me hit on this. So with the weapon systems I talked about, and the operations technology, we are very immature with defining cybersecurity requirements for these systems, like we would a classic system. Like I said, a classic endpoint device or workstation, we have pretty well-defined requirements for software and hardware. But for these odd systems out there, we're not very mature with defining, well, what's the security requirement for an HVAC system, an industrial control for system? That's something that's evolving quickly. And then also supply chain risk management. Where are you buying that thing? Where was it made? Where are the components made? Supply chain risk management. Another topic that's very much immature that needs to evolve in how we buy things. I know in Hawaii, we purchased, look at this monitor here, but that's really a screen, but we purchased 40 or 50 monitors like that for a new facility we were opening. And we purchased it from an approved list, right? Hey, you approved this for us to buy. And then we got the list and they did the analysis. The Intel folks came in, looked at the components, said you can't connect it. What are we going to do with it now? There's this subcomponent here. We pulled it out and we looked and you're not going to be able to connect just to the network. So supply chain risk management is another challenge for us. When we talk about weapon systems too. All right, supply chain risk, just talked about that. Acquisition, I talked about that. All right, so I think that's it. No, it's not it. Let's look at the 2 areas in red there. So difficulty in acquiring, because that's kind of the theme at the end here, is cyber talent, right? So we are on the hunt for cyber talent, not just acquiring it but being able to retain talent, because in this field, obviously for everyone, there's a financial aspect of, if we can't pay you enough to retain you and keep you interested enough in the type of work you're doing for us in the Army or in DOD, then chances are you may go out somewhere where you like, or you're more creatively challenged with a job you have with Google versus a job you might have with the Army. And that's okay, because like I said, we're moving more and more of our stuff to Google. We're moving more of our stuff to Microsoft. So my intent here today is not necessarily to say, come work for the Army. It's like, hey, if you're in cybersecurity, I want you to be in cybersecurity, because it's a collective effort. It's industry, it's government, all working together. But we are challenged with acquiring and recruiting, and then the necessary skill sets for the future. When I talk about zero trust, it's something I know Dr. Manick and I will talk about after this talk. It's like, what is academia offering like in this area now in the future? I can tell you industry, every other email in my inbox today is, sir, we got a zero trust solution for you. We can do it all, which you'll hear me talk about. Oh, you can? All right. So, you know, industry's jumping on the train quickly because they see that DoD is going to invest in cybersecurity. And yeah, I want to hear from everybody. But to say that you have it all figured out, I'm not quite sure that you understand zero trust if you say that, because it's much more than just one tool. And we'll talk about that. Maybe some of you know more about it than I do. But okay, let me go to the next chart. All right, so let's talk about zero trust. I came in August, and I don't think there's a day or 2 days that go by where this is not being driven pretty hard right now from within the Pentagon, right? Like, Army, what are you doing to align to zero trust? And they've given us some direction and some guidance on where they want us to go. When I say they, I'm talking DoD, right? All the services aligned under the Department of Defense. There's a CIO for DoD. His name's Mr. John Sherman. And he has a CISO named Mr. Dave McEwen. And that CISO, McEwen, looks at me and says, hey, Jan, you're in the Army. We want you to move to zero trust. Here's where we want you to go by. And they've given us a date, which I'll talk about. But again, many of you in the room may be familiar with this topic. And again, another book, always good. George Fenney, I don't know, he claims he started, you know, the concept. I don't know if he did, maybe he did, but this is called Project Zero Trust, George Fenney. And they give a very good vignette throughout this book about a company and how they moved to zero trust. But then they also give very good takeaways about the components of zero trust and what you need to do to move to zero trust, which is kind of the buzzword right now, as I said. If I never went to work, I could meet with an industry partner every day because they're all waiting in line to talk to me about what they can do for the Army, which is good, I want to hear from everybody and how you can help. It's not just the Army, it's all the services. But let me talk just a little bit about the Army's network and why zero trust is important. If you understand zero trust, you'll know exactly what I'm about to lay out here. But our network, our existing infrastructure, our physical infrastructure is on the land around the world, right? We have a network here in the continental United States. I was out in Hawaii in command. We had a physical network on 7 land masses in the Pacific: Hawaii, Alaska, Japan, Korea, Guam, Kwajalein. So we have physical infrastructure that is global in the Army, right? The way it's been built historically over time, though, it's very much a security boundary network, right? So if you're in Europe on the Army network, you can access that network. If you go to Hawaii and access the Pacific network, it's a different boundary, right? You're not allowed in to that network unless you have an account, unless you have credentials on the in Active Directory, and it's not seamless, right? You can't just go from one to the other and connect. It's a boundary network. But once you're in the network, you're trusted. You're in. If you have the credentials and the CAT card and you're authenticated, you're in, and that's it. You're in. You're accessing data, you're accessing tools and services and apps. And that's problematic. As I said earlier, we have too many of those separate networks. It's hard to manage. And for operations in the Army, when we want to send a unit from Fort Bragg, North Carolina to the Pacific, we'd like that unit to be able to pick up their stuff, move. I don't know where they would go. Maybe it's the South China Sea, right? But when they go there, we'd like them to be able to just plug in and access the data seamlessly, not have to call someone in Honolulu for account access, right? That's the unified network I'm talking about. But it's still boundary, right? Still very much segmented. So we call that the brownfield, right? I don't know if you've used these terms, but that's our brownfield infrastructure. Our greenfield infrastructure in the Army is what we're doing in the cloud for the last 2 years. That's our greenfield. That's where we're moving. We want to move more and more into the cloud over time. It's more efficient. It's just as secure or more secure, and it's less costly to do that. Now, up front, it's a little more cost, but trying to manage physical infrastructure across the globe versus putting it in the cloud and access is a much more efficient way to do business. And that's where we're moving. But again, our existing infrastructure is based on this concept that you're authenticated and you're in, and that's it. Once you're in, you're in. Zero trust, as you may know, is the opposite. It's constant and continuous verification. Once you're in, you're not necessarily trusted once you're in. In fact, it's the opposite. You're never trusted. There's this constant demand signal, either Number one, for you as a user, and number two, for the device you're connecting with, whether that's a classic laptop, desktop, mobile device, whatever you're connecting with, you're going to be continuously authenticated for who you are, and your device is going to be continuously authenticated so that it's compliant, right? You as a user, based on who you are, your identity, you get authenticated, and based on who you are, and for us in the Army, that could be me, that could be a coalition partner, that could be a joint service partner, Air Force, Navy, and Army, Marine. You get in, verifies who you are, and based on who you are, you get access to certain data. You don't get access to it all, you get access to the data based on your identity, but you are constantly and continuously authenticated and verified. That's the, I may oversimplify that. That's the concept behind zero trust and where we're moving. And we have to move there because the president told us we have to move there. And my bosses in the Pentagon told us we have to move there. But it's very, and I know industry, I know Google's been doing it for about 10 years now. If anybody hears from Google, you can tell me differently. And they're still maturing towards zero trust. I know they started a while back. We're just getting started in the Army and DoD. So let me talk about DoD's framework. Now, if you've seen other frameworks with zero trust, this is the one DoD adopted, right? This, you may have seen it framed differently in industry, like they took a different approach. This is the way the Department of Defense is moving to zero trust. 7 pillars, you can see them listed. User, I talked about user, identity, right? To me, identity is the front door, right? That's the most important thing. We got to know who you are, validate who you are, authenticate who you are with least, this concept of least privileged access. You're only going to get in based on who you are and what you need access to. Not the other way with our own network. You get in, there was not much control over what you got access to, and we never verified you once you were in. Now it's going to be a different framework. Device, right? What are you connecting with? And is that device compliant, right? To be able to connect, right? So application workload data. Data is another one where we're, we have lots of data in the Army stored on lots of devices, but very little of that data is tagged or filtered or appropriately analyzed. And we have data that's like 30 years old, some of it very sensitive data that do we even need to be storing and retaining anymore, right? And that's the data pillar. Then there's network environment, automation, orchestration, and then the visibility and the analytics. I talked about asset visibility. Do you have a SIEM tool out there? ArcSight, you can name a number of them. And the answer in the Army is, yeah, we have some, but the one we have in Europe is not the same as the one we have in the Pacific. It's not the same as the one we have here in continental United States. So there's a challenge with that. But the point I want you to take away is what DoD has told the Army, the Marines, the Air Force, and Navy is you need to move to these 7 pillars. And the next chart I'm going to show you, you're not going to be able to read it, but I want just to make a point with the scope of where we're going with zero trust. 7 pillars, 45 capabilities. And then what you see on this chart, you can't read. But under each pillar, excuse me, as you can see, the pillars are aligned that way. There are activities that DoD has said you need to align to. So by 2027, the Department of Defense said, hey, Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, you need to align to 90 target activities by 2027. You need to get your network infrastructure. You can stay with brownfield or you can move to a greenfield. What we've said in the Army is it's going to be hard to move everything globally to a greenfield in 4 years. We're going to go with a hybrid approach. We're going to migrate capability to our brownfield, and the stuff we have in the cloud, we're going to align to this concept. And this is where industry's already seen this, and they go, hey, Microsoft, hey, we got a tool that'll do 150 today. I'm like, really? Okay, I hear you. I'd like to see proof in that you have one tool that can do all of this. Really? Okay, I'm open to hearing that, right? Because now I'm getting everyone's coming at me, and not just me, but hey, we can do this. So the point I want you to take from this is pretty intense, right? This is not just one thing, right? It's broken down by 7 pillars. There are tools aligned to each of these pillars. It's not one tool because it's too intense. It's 150 activities to get to the advanced state. What DoD has asked us to do is to get to 90 by 2027. Again, all about getting to a better security framework so that we can protect our data in the future. So that's just a picture you can't read the details on, but I just wanted to give you the scope on where we're going. Let me see if there was anything else I wanted to say. Yeah, that's where we're going. All right, so let's go to the final slide here. I don't know how we're doing on time. Oh, wow, taking up a lot. So future workforce. So I kind of made up that four-word phrase there: recruit, retain, upskill, train. And these are some of the skill sets we need, right? Whether it's cloud, DevSecOps. We have a tool called Create down in San Antonio, Texas, with a team of soldiers who develop software using that tool. That's the DevSecOps piece. And they've created some software tools and apps that we've since tested, validated, red teamed, and put them in the cloud, and we're using them today. So we have a software development team that's there, but that's a high skill that we're looking for. Zero trust, I just talked about. Who's an expert in zero trust? Maybe there are a few out there. And Dr. Mann, we'll talk about like what opportunities can academia provide, maybe even here at VCU. Just a hypothetical, like, do you offer a certificate in zero trust? If you did, I might be interested in that, just because of, I know this is what we're going to be dealing with for years to come. And you can read all the other things on the chart. I won't read them all off. What I would also tell you, Nate can back me up on this, because of this challenge we have with retaining cyber skills. There is a thing in DoD now, maybe you've heard of it, called cyber accepted service. Now, what that allows us to do, there's this traditional hiring process in DoD where, you send out an announcement, people read the announcement, they submit a resume, the resumes get vetted for qualifications, then that list comes out, you get the list and you collect the resumes, and that on average takes 5 to 6 months, right? On average now, sometimes longer than that. You got to get clearances vetted. We still need to do that too. But what this does is it's accepted, meaning you don't have to follow that process. You have to follow some steps, but not all of them. And if there's talent out there that's qualified, not only can we hire you quickly, we have the discretion within the command to say, if you've got the right skill set, maybe you're coming right out of school, you don't have a lot of experience, but you have a skill, or maybe you have more experience, we can hire you at any pay grade we can up to what, like 14, 15? No limit, right? GS 15 is like the senior civilian position. I don't know what that salary equivalent is, but it's pretty high. So we have the flexibility now because of this challenge we have with cyber talent to bring you in without that routine process where before you might have gotten screened out because say, well, you don't have a PhD, you don't qualify, you're not even going to make the list. Now it's like, no, we're looking at you individually with skill sets, cyber effective. So something to think about. Again, I'm not here to recruit you. I'm just saying there are opportunities, and they did this because we need cyber talent now. We're going to need to grow it to do the things I just talked about with zero trust and others. So, and then the piece about academia helping. We have an internship program, and certainly we're interested in that. Anything we can do from a partnership perspective, like if there is a program that you develop that even our existing workforce would be interested in, because where do you find your zero trust talent right now? Not just like, hey, I'm an expert in user device or an analytics tool, but who can integrate all that? Who has the knowledge to take all that I just showed you and to be able to integrate that onto an existing network or in the cloud? So that's a skill set. Well, I'm telling you, if you're interested in this field, I think you've got job security for time to come, just for DoD alone, because DoD is big, right? But everybody's moving to zero trust for the reasons I just talked about: the threat, the landscape, and just the way we're operating now is not where we need to be. So, and we're at 46 minutes. So, so I'll take any questions you may have, and I hope you have some. And but before I do, I would just leave you with go Rams, right? I am a Rams fan. I will always be a Rams fan. So thanks for having me today, and I'll take any questions you have. If you're less inclined to ask me a question in a public forum like this, I'm okay with that. I'll be here. I know we're gonna eat lunch later, but if you wanted to ask me anything individually. So any questions now, go ahead.
So I hear what you're saying. I think it's important that you protect the forts and the castles within the military.
Yeah.
What would the military's role would be if there's a cyber war and the big companies are not worried about, they have sophisticated, but 90% of all the companies in the US are 200 people or less. They're responsible for 70% of the payroll and 44% of the economy. and they have no cybersecurity professionals. If something happens there, would the military get involved, and how would that happen?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and well, I could give you I'm trying to think there's some things that we've done. Well, let me just describe to you some capabilities we have in the Army, right? And we have them in DoD for scenarios like you're talking about, whether it's defense of the homeland, right? Like the continental United States, there's a big cyber event that happens, right? And as you know, it's kind of like with police and the military, right? Like if there's a problem right here in Richmond, requires police enforcement, like the military typically posse comitatus, if you know the rules, you can't put military forces to substitute for a police force mission in a local community, right? Well, with cyber, it would probably come down to the president, right? Like there's a big problem. The president turns to the U.S. Cyber Command Commander, General Nakasone, right? He's the NSA. He's got two hats. He's the National Security Agency guy, and he's the Cybercom commander. He has capabilities. I can tell you within the Army, we have a cyber protection brigade, right? And these are cyber protection teams that are missioned to go out, largely defense. We also have an OCO brigade, offensive cyber operations. They do the hunt stuff, right? Very classified. I don't even get that type of information, things that they may be asked to do. So we have a response force for what you're talking about. It's just how it would be employed, right? Is it deployed? Like if we're in a conflict somewhere, and you could talk about Ukraine now, although we're not physically in Ukraine, right? Have we done some things in Europe to help with cyber defense for nations surrounding Ukraine? Yes, we have, right? Poland and some other areas, we've done some things to help them defend attack from Russia, maybe on their networks, right? We've done that. If it was in the continental United States, it would then require that approval, right? If the president asks the Cybercom commander and the president and Congress approve to use a military cyber capability in defense of the homeland, then it would just need to be approved appropriately to do that.
This is something that I've been very interested in.
Yeah.
Worked for the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
Been in security for 40 years.
Yeah.
And my focus has been lately on the elections in the
All right.
there's 131 localities, municipalities and counties, and we went last summer. We worked with 17 of them, and they don't like to be dictated to, but we listened.
Right.
We're creating a SOC to do things like identify their software and hardware through NIST's database, and then they can view their vulnerabilities. We help them demystify it for them. The other key is that they wanted was incident response. So we've got a system where we can put them in groups, and elections can say, we're in this group, they can see an attack vector happening across the counties. The trouble is they have trouble getting anyone to help remediate. So that what they go to is the state police fusion. Well, they're not interested in remediating, they're interested in collecting evidence. So we need some agency that we can help remediate an attack vector going across Virginia.
Yeah, so again, we have capability, and how it would get employed would depend on, like, if it's a local community election, you know, the state governor or the local official may go somewhere to ask for help, right? I just know at a national level, for a national election, for example, Cybercom would absolutely be involved with some type of support in ensuring that we keep any external vectors clean on the internet, right? So, but that would have to be a request. Do you have something?
Have you spoken with CISA, Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency?
Yes,
What have they told you?
they said they're willing to work with us.
That would be the primary agency for civilian agencies, but the Cybercom, as General noted, is primarily on the national security side, specifically the military side, where CISA handles civilian agencies, local national agencies, companies, and all that.
So that in the application we're writing, we're making it so that you can identify people who are participating in what services they want. But then we also have a place where we can define uniquely, dynamically responders. So for instance, if you want to respond to a certain group that's local governments, we can put you involved, or CISA or whoever. But yeah.
And that's also a place to look for grants as well.
Right, well, we've got a grant right now. We're looking for more, but
Okay, yeah, good question. Thanks.
So you mentioned greenfield, is it your private cloud or you work with the industry or public cloud? And how do you manage their dependency on a third party or trust?
Yeah, so so when I say greenfield, I'm talking collectively about anything we're doing off-prem that's not our existing infrastructure. In other words, we have racks, TLA stacks and bases and camps. That's the brownfield stuff we've been managing for years. The greenfield is everything we put out with Amazon, with Microsoft, and I just use it collectively. The second part of your question that I've been largely in discovery on, because I've been in this job for 3 months, is the SLAs, the service level agreements, and the terms and conditions of contracts with, I've been asking for them, and then I ask, and then my chief's like, sir, we don't have an SLA. What do you mean we don't have an SLA? Well, we're just using their standing SLA with all their customers. Go to their website, 99% reliability, 99%. Yeah, because if you ask for anything else, they're going to charge you more, right? Well, why do you in government need something that we're already not doing for our customers? Here's our reliability, here's our service agreement with this particular tool or app. I don't know if that's a good enough answer for me, because I'm just thinking about scenarios where, hey, if we just accept what they do for everybody, is that okay, right? Like when we have a problem, then they go, well, who agreed to the SLA? They're going to look at me like, you're the CISO. You agreed to that? Yeah, I was okay with that because so far we haven't had a problem, but the terms and conditions are something else that I need to look at as well as we move forward, because what's going to happen over time, more and more is going to move from the brownfield to the greenfield, to the cloud, right? Over time, we're just going to migrate more and more, and we just need to be, we just need to do our due diligence. It's my job with my team to ensure that everything we're doing, I can assure my bosses, because believe me, when I was out in Hawaii with my first star boss, and I went to a map and I said, sir, the Army made a decision to buy a Microsoft 365. Army 365 is what we call it. He goes, oh, okay, that's great. It's been working great. And he goes, where's the data, Jan? I said, well, sir, the data is back in Virginia and Texas. There's no replication of the data in the Pacific anywhere, right? It's not in Hawaii. It's not in Japan. It's back here. And so he goes, we can't operate that way. Like how can we operate? I go, well, so it's working for you. Our SLA said they're going to, as long as we got the transport to support it, we're okay. Now, the challenge we also have with our brownfield, with our greenfield provider, is the cloud, the data that traverses from that cloud, wherever that cloud is physically, right? I mentioned Virginia and Texas, 2 big data centers for Microsoft. When that data leaves that cloud and comes into our network, there's a term called the BCAP, where it enters our infrastructure, that's where we find we have a lot of problems, right? So I call Microsoft, hey, what's up? And they go, that's not on us, that's your infrastructure. Once it traverses from our commercial connection to your connection, that's on you, right? So that's a challenge when you have a hybrid environment, because the provider here says, we're giving you everything you need. We're good. All our customers are good. Why are you not good, Army? And then we do the analysis, it's our infrastructure. So over time, we need to come off our infrastructure and just go more to theirs. But it's not something you can do quickly because it's so large, right?
So is it important for Army to ensure that the data does not leave the United States in the cloud infrastructure?
That is a concern. There is a caveat with some data, because we've had to get exceptions from DOD, like if you're going to do this on a foreign territory.
The States is everywhere.
Yeah, right. So we have a territory in Guam, for example. Like right now in the Pacific, that's a big area of interest for us because it's a U.S. territory. And so that's a place we're looking at forward replication of data in Guam for operations in the future in that part of the world. Same thing in Europe, right? So you're making me think about a lot of things now when you brought that up. Like with different ways for resiliency with moving our data, right? Starlink, LEO terminals are very popular right now because they operate in low Earth orbit, and Elon Musk is launching like 60 a week. So it's just every week that cluster of satellites that are moving in low Earth orbit are moving, and there's global reach, right? And that's pretty good from a threat perspective, because you might be able to take out a geostationary satellite because it doesn't move. But if you try to take out all the Starlink, you might take out a few of them. You can't take out all of them. And so we're trying to use different means of transporting our data in places like that. The problem is some countries haven't agreed to allow Starlink to land in their country. Particularly when I talk west of the international date line, I talk countries like Thailand, the Philippines, where we're trying to build up a more credible presence just for competition in that region. So, so very good question. Thank you. Thank you. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
I have two questions, but first, thank you for coming down here and spending time today. And the first question is around kind of a governance or an architecture type of standpoint. Do you have a team of trusted individuals, from industry, government, consultant, wherever, that you can kind of call upon on a regular basis and say, where's all this going? Because this whole landscape is changing so fast. Yeah. And the technology is evolving so fast. You can integrate more to real-time AI, all this sort of thing. Is there a way to capture that, within your organization and stay current? And then the second part of the question is kind of alongside. If you could, you're down here to go encourage us to go produce talent. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you like to see?
Okay.
What can VCU do to help you?
Yeah. So the first part of your question, I think my answer is an acronym CSSP, Cybersecurity Service Provider. Right. So I mentioned I'm the AO for the Army Cloud. So so I was an AO in the Pacific for the network out there, and I had a team of professionals. Combined experience about 30 years, all of them IAM level 3 certified. If you know what that means. They're the CISM, CSSP. They have certifications. They have experience, and they are essentially, for systems that we connect, they are essentially that team. Now, there's not, like with the cloud, like I want a separate team, right? I don't want, I don't necessarily want Microsoft. We are certainly in communication with them as we push things into their environment. But I want a separate team of objective evaluators that are not interested in profit, right? That are not interested in profit only. Yes, we've got the solution. All our customers are good. I have a team like for the cloud, right? Rosie Pittman's her name, and she leads a team of security professionals that advise me on a weekly basis about here's what we're doing. We have a change configuration management board that vets everything. Everybody has a proposal to put a tool in the cloud. It has to go through this process. So that's what we call CSSP. We also have an element in Adelphi, Maryland called C5ISR. They do some cybersecurity defense for us too. And a lot of it is not just, hey, you're approved and you're in, but for our cloud, part of our agreement with Microsoft and Azure, we get to scan your environment. Oh, by the way, we want root access. You want to talk about a hard thing to get from a service provider? Is to say, we're going to get root access on the infrastructure we're paying you to provide to us. And I wasn't here, but I heard from my team, it took us 3 months. Hey, we agreed to this. We want root access. That's hard for a commercial provider to give up. Like, we're the provider, but no, we want root access because it's a commercial cloud, but it's a government commercial cloud. And it's a security level called IL5. We have IL1 to 5. IL5 is classified or sensitive unclassified information. So we have a security metric we use in our commercial cloud, but CSSP. So that's the first part. The second part I kind of alluded to is zero trust, things that skill set list there. If there are things that you can offer that not that other institutions aren't offering, but it's tailored to things like zero trust that could generate interest in it, because everyone in DoD sees this is where we're going. The workforce that we have an aged workforce, like any organization where I've been doing this 40 years. I'm not doing that, right? I'm retiring in 5 years. I'm not making the migration to all this new stuff, right? We have that group. And then we have the group that's in the middle that are interested. And then of course the younger group, yeah, I want to do this. This is what I like doing. And I'm all about getting, if it's not an advanced degree or an undergraduate degree, I'm interested in a certificate or something that gets me. Zero trust is just one example, but to what I laid out for you there, and what DoD and what the White House has directed, this is going to be our way for quite some time. So if academia can align to that, like I said, when I became an AO in Hawaii 4 years ago, I was 51 years old. And my team's like, sir, you need to be IAM level 3 certified. I go, what? They go, yeah, like you should be like us. I go, okay, what does that mean? Well, you got to study, you got to take a 200-question test to get CISM. And so I'm like, what? I got to do, I'm like, I was in school here, yeah, so I did it, right? And if you offer, so I would, in my position to lead, I'm going to do it too. I'm going to do it just like I expect my team to do it, to show them. So that's the kind of thing we're interested in. And again, I'm not just limiting it to that. You guys, are thinking about this probably deeper than I am and other things, but that list of skill sets, and those are the kind of things. And then we could potentially partner. If you offer something, we could develop a partnership. And I'm the Army CISO, right? I represent the Army, so I could get folks interested in that.
We would love that.
Yeah, we'd love to.
And just as a comment, there's a very large financial institution with a global network operations center miles from here that they want the exact same list.
Right.
There's a large, what I call digital integrator,
right.
Globally oriented company wanting the same thing. I think it'd be very logical to partner with a couple of very sophisticated users and develop a program.
Right.
Yeah. We're trying to bring in the highly advanced tools to go do this.
Okay.
I was just going to ask, this might sound like a very naive question for a non-engineer. When it comes to issues of national security, our power grids, aviation, big manufacturing, etc., what are the situations where the military cannot get involved, even though it's national security, and it will get involved in certain situations? What are these kinds?
Yeah. Well, it would all be defined, kind of like I mentioned with the police force example, where you can think about the event last year in the Capitol, right? Where there was a lot of controversy about who should respond to that? And even military officials getting asked directly, like, hey, can you send a National Guard in? Like, well, and very sensitive to how that is approved, right? And usually it's typically sourced from the president, or if it's local in a state, the governor. But from my time in the Pacific, there are some scenarios for Homeland Defense, right? The Department of Homeland Defense would be responsible for securing. But there have been scenarios when I know we've been, I'm trying to think of some very specific examples I could give you, where we have provided expertise or advice, or at least capability. It's not coming to mind directly now.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah, but it's something that I'd be interested in talking about more with you as well. So sorry to give you an example of that, but I just think we have capability in DoD, and if it's something that's out of bounds with what we would normally do, then it would just be up to the executive level of government to decide if we're going to go beyond. Hey, and I know now what I'm thinking about. The exercises we did in the Pacific, where it would be, let's just say, a PRC scenario, something that's happened and we're getting attacked globally in cyber, right? Well, there are some scenarios where, hey, the cable landing station in Hawaii has been compromised physically. And then there's this turn to, well, who can help us with that, right? Is there a civilian agency? And usually it comes back to the government, like, well, there's no one else to help but the Army. And now who's going to approve that for an industrial base that's not connected to the military at all, but we have expertise and capability. And so in the cycle of the exercise, that approval process gets vetted. Like, well, who would we even ask for that help? Like, hey, someone needs to go down there. We need an expert. We can't find one in Hawaii anywhere. There's not a civilian agency here. If it's not CISA, maybe, in the scenario, but there have been a lot of scenarios where they've come back to the military for help, just like in many things that happen in the world, right? It's just, how would it get approved? And usually that would be an executive level decision. Yeah, so that's the one example I was thinking about. Any other questions?
I could offer implicit way of doing this. I was very much interested in aviation and planes, and visited all kinds of manufacturing Airbus facilities in Europe. And I kept on asking what's the difference between Boeing and Airbus. And the guy told me, but see, we create fuselage out of pieces because we are European Union and we'll get Rolls-Royce from England and we'll get this from there and we'll transport. We cannot transport the fuselage. The advantage of US is that it has strong military and Boeing will draw some technological advances later on for civilian part. And this is one implicit, not direct way where I would think this is the right way to do it. But I'd like to, we are a little bit over the time, I'd like to add on a positive note. When I was in Norfolk, at some point I bought a mug with a very explicit message. It says, I may get the number wrong, 50,000 tons of diplomacy in a carrier. That's a deterrent that you were talking about. In cyber world, those deterrents are not measured by towns, liters, or whatever. They're measured in some other unit. Can you give us assurance that we have the deterrents ahead of time? And I will mention, a while ago, Dr. Alexander Keith was giving a talk at the University of Richmond, and he was talking about one incident that I'm not going to mention, but it starts with S. And he was talking about how, a few months ago, a few months ahead, and so on. So this human factor, intelligence factor, is incredibly important, maybe even so these days than in the old times, 50, 100 years ago. We have a good posture there. We have a strong posture. We are ahead of our other nefarious nation-state actors. Can you just give us a positive note of that?
I don't know what your S, I know there was Sputnik. Remember the thing that we did. No, does it? Okay, yeah, so yeah, a couple of things on deterrence. I know there's some things that we've done, like in Iran, that, wasn't disclosed until after the fact, but then was deliberately disclosed to send a message that we have a capability to actually get in and cause something to shut itself down, right? So that was one example. The other challenge we have with deterrence, not just in cyber, but in the information warfare domain, and I experienced this out in Hawaii on a number of occasions where some nation in the Pacific would take an action, could be an action in the info space, like messaging or even like launching a balloon, right, from another and flying it over Hawaii and observing. And my boss saying like, hey, they're winning the information war here. What can we do to counter that, right? As a deterrence, like to compete and show that we're strong. And so I know in the one case, my boss actually nominated a target, like, hey, let's take this balloon down. That when we flew one in this area, they took it down, right? They took our balloon down. I gave them take their balloon down. And then he'll nominate it to his boss and then goes back here to the Beltway. And the answer is no. We don't always respond in the like measure. We have values, we're a nation, and but that's a challenge, right? It's a challenge in cyberspace too, at least with attribution of someone does something to us, do we respond the same way, at least openly, right? Where we don't always respond in like just because they take down our server doesn't mean we're going to openly take down theirs, right? And so how do you win when you do that? Unless you do it and no one knows you did it, right? So that's the tricky element of deterrence. But I think if you read this book, and kind of getting back to that point with the plan that I talked about that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has to dominate globally in the information domain and with information technology. One of the conclusions here is that they, number one, they're not there yet. Number two, we can feed the paranoia with our deterrence capability to show them that they can't. Now, it's not like I'm painting a picture like the CCP's evil empire and they want to take over the world, but the proposal, at least by this man, right, you don't have to believe it, is a very interesting one because what he describes has happened. There have been acquisitions of major IT firms. There have been, and so what's the intent of doing all that? If you're not trying to, like, why would you be doing this, right? So it's a very interesting proposition, but to your point about deterrence, there are some things we do where we openly demonstrate capability to show that we have an ability to counter that. There are some things we can't do, at least openly, because we don't fall to the techniques of let's say a cyber terrorist. We're not terrorists. We're not going to respond in kind with the same act that a terrorist would execute or deliver to us, right? So that's the challenge. It was challenging for my bosses because it's about authorities, right? You got these warfighting bosses in the Army who are out there trying to just compete and win. And then like, well, why can't we do that? No, you don't have the authority to do that. Only General Nakasone can approve that action in cyberspace. You can't. Well, wait a minute. I'm right here on the edge. I can take an action that has effect to help us compete and deter, right? We can actually, by doing this, we actually deter because we demonstrate strength. But in the cyberspace and the info domain, it's a very sensitive subject, right? Yeah, much, much more difficult, unless, of course, it's done and no one knows we did it, right? And that's another thing with some of our partners, you know, our allied partners. You know, some nations have authorities we don't have. So if we're in a combined operation, and again, I just came from the Pacific, but you know, if we're in an operation with the Thais and the Filipino Army, they may have a capability we don't have if we're in a scenario where they can execute some authority in cyber that we can't to take an effect on an adversary. So that's another way to leverage it, but it's all about attribution usually in the end. And can you take an action? Maybe you want to be attributed, right? In some cases, you want them to know we did it just for competition to deter. Strength is deterrence, right? Yeah. Yeah. So yes. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? I know we're at the hour. Yeah.
So I mean, it's known that the human are the weakest links for any vulnerabilities here. So, there any measurements that you're taking for the people that non-IT, non-security, where people think that you'll be or Army that to prevent or train them or something else? I'm wondering what you do because this is always something for all the entities that now I'm talking about the itself, the Army itself. How do you make sure that these are not the weakest point that we can attack or we can put them to?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so that's the persona layer of the infrastructure I was talking about, right? People. We just had our cybersecurity awareness month last month in DoD. That's October every year. So we have a 2-day forum where we talk about cybersecurity techniques. We have training, user training, right? To the point now where it's mandatory, right? Now, I say mandatory like you have to do it. No, it's mandatory because if you don't do it, you don't get on the network. Like if your training expires and you try to access the network, it won't let you get on. It says, nope, sorry, you're overdue here. You got to complete this course before. So training is one way, awareness forums is another. But I agree with you.
You think this is enough?
Yeah, well, it's persistent, right? It's never enough. It's never enough. And like I said, most of the problems I've experienced on the network with someone on our team, on our network, operating, making a change, they didn't intend it to be a bad effect. But when they made the change, it had a negative consequence that we didn't intend to make. And we spent 3 days trying to figure it out. And then we can't figure it out. We call Microsoft or Amazon because we tried for 36 hours and then we have to have some expert come in. And it usually comes down to log data, like, and talk about AI. Like if we could find a tool that could do scans of log data, like a tool that could just take all this log data, scan it actively, right? And scan. Oh, anomaly, scan, anomaly, and see those anomalies and start reporting them to someone. Go, hey, before the thing crashes, somebody's getting an alert. Because what happens is the opposite. We have a problem. We're scanning through the logs, trying to find a problem, and then when we can't, we call Microsoft, and then that guy or gal, oh yeah, like we should have called you 2 days ago because you went right to the. But if we had an automated tool to do that,
No, actually, what you're discussing is in place with some functionality already,
oh, okay,
and they're we're talking about milliseconds on verifying the third-party information or the historic database, the security of each transaction. So, Milos is familiar with what we're trying to put together here. But there's the tools are, and we're not privy to all the most advanced stuff, but the tools are broadly here, but it goes back to your whole point. To begin to implement it because it's everybody's interested in doing this and it's really important.
So yeah, and to your point, with all those activities I showed you, zero trust, 150. Hey, yeah, put them on your network. Who's gonna manage them? Who knows how to operate and integrate all that? Right? Yeah, so so if you're in this industry, you've got a job for a long time to come. And I hope you are, whether you're getting ready to finish school and start working. Again, not that you have to come work for the military. If you're working in this field, it's a collective effort. Again, and I'm here on behalf of the Army and the nation to protect and defend our nation. So if you're an industry doing that, I appreciate it.